In the fall of 1978, a 21-year-old man named Richard Carlson walked out of his parents' farmhouse in rural Minnesota and never came back. No fight, no note, no warning. Just vanished. For years, his family searched. They put up flyers, hired private investigators, even consulted psychics out of sheer desperation. But after a decade and then two, hope turned into silence. Life moved on as it always does, but the wound never fully closed. Now it's 2023. Richard's younger brother, Tom, a retired high school teacher living in Duluth, checks his mailbox one chilly October morning. Among the usual bills and ads, there's a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside, a short, handwritten note. For decades after losing his brother, Tom is about to uncover something he thought was lost forever. Hit like, subscribe, and let's go. Tom Carlson never left Minnesota. After Richard disappeared, someone had to stay behind, hold the family together, and care for their aging parents. Tom married his high school sweetheart, raised two kids, and spent 35 years teaching American history at the same school he once attended. His days now were simple: morning coffee in the same kitchen he'd remodeled in the 90s, weekend fishing trips with his grandson, and evenings spent with a good book or the radio humming low. There was comfort in routine, but also a quiet ache he rarely spoke about. Every now and then, a face in a crowd or a voice in a dream brought Richard back to mind. Not in a painful way, more like a whisper from a past that had never fully let go. Tom had made peace with the unknown, or so he thought. That envelope would change everything. It was a gray Tuesday morning when Tom found the envelope. No return address, just his name written in neat, careful handwriting that felt oddly familiar. He opened it slowly, half expecting some local political flyer or a neighbor's lost pet notice. But inside was a single sheet of lined paper folded twice. The message was short: "I'm sorry I left. I was never far. Can we talk?" Tom sat down at the kitchen table, the note trembling slightly in his hand. It couldn't be. His heart didn't race. He was too old for that kind of drama now, but something tightened in his chest. After all these years, could it really be Richard? He looked out the window where the last of the maple leaves fluttered to the ground. The world outside looked the same, but something had shifted. Something small and unmistakable. The next morning, Tom found another envelope. Same plain paper, same careful handwriting. This time, it contained an old photo, faded and yellowing at the edges. It showed two boys in flannel shirts fishing by a lake. It was them. Him and Richard, summer of 1974. On the back, just 3 words: Lake Nokomis. Saturday. Tom stared at it for a long time. That lake was 3 hours south, near where they'd grown up. He hadn't been back in decades. The idea that someone could have this photo and know its meaning sent a slow unease creeping through his thoughts. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the weight of a memory returning from a place he'd long kept locked. He placed the photo gently on the kitchen counter next to the first note. His coffee had gone cold. Something was unfolding. And it felt personal. Too personal to ignore for much longer. By Friday, Tom couldn't take the guessing anymore. He packed a thermos of coffee, dusted off an old road map, and headed south toward Lake Nokomis. The drive stirred something deep: old barns, quiet fields, places that hadn't changed since the 70s. As he neared the lake, he spotted a man sitting alone on a bench near the shoreline. Gray-haired, wiry, back slightly hunched, he looked like any other retiree enjoying the fall air. But when the man turned his head, Tom's breath caught. The eyes were unmistakable. They didn't speak at first, just stared. Then the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. Tom recognized it instantly. Their fathers, lost the same week Richard disappeared. Richard's voice was hoarse. "I didn't die. I ran." The weight of 4 decades crashed into Tom like a wave. He had found his brother. But now came the harder part: understanding why. They sat by the lake for nearly an hour before Richard spoke again. His words were quiet, almost rehearsed. He'd left in 78 not because of some tragedy or crime, but because of fear. Their father had discovered something: an unexpected pregnancy, a secret relationship, and tempers had flared. Richard panicked, left town with nothing but his wallet and a borrowed name. He'd built a life under the radar: odd jobs, small towns, never staying long. No family, no attachments. But what struck Tom hardest wasn't the past, it was what came next. Richard was sick, diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's 2 years ago. And now finally he wanted to be found. Tom's hands clenched in his lap. He felt blindsided. Angry that his brother had stayed hidden for so long, guilty for not searching harder, terrified of what lay ahead. After all this time, was there even a way to bring Richard back into the world he'd left behind? Tom didn't know how to feel. The rush of emotions, relief, anger, confusion, was overwhelming. Richard was alive, but he wasn't the same. The brother Tom had imagined all these years, the one he'd hoped to find, was now a shadow of his former self. The disease had taken its toll. His hands trembled constantly, his movements slow, deliberate. Tom wanted to help, but a part of him deep inside was furious. 40 years, Richard had been missing, and for what? To run from his family, to leave everyone in the dark while he built a new life, a secret life? Then, as they stood by the lake, Richard's voice cracked. "I need your help. I can't do this alone." Tom's throat tightened. The choice was clear: walk away and leave his brother to whatever he'd created, or face the mess of a life Richard had made and try to put it back together. What would Tom do now? The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. Tom tried to reach out to family, to old friends, anyone who could make sense of Richard's disappearance and sudden reappearance. But the more he learned, the more he realized how deep Richard's isolation had run. No one knew anything about his life in the years he'd been gone. He cut ties with the past completely, and now Tom was left with a man he barely recognized, lost, sick, and clinging to the last threads of what had once been his family. Then came the phone call. Richard had tried to check into a local clinic for his condition but was turned away. They didn't have the resources to treat him. His illness was progressing too fast. Tom felt the weight of helplessness crash down. Richard was slipping away, physically and mentally, faster than he could catch up. But there was still one thing left. Tom wasn't ready to give up on him yet. Tom didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't leave Richard to face this alone. After a long conversation with his wife, Nancy, he made the decision. He would bring Richard home. The process wasn't easy. They found a nearby clinic that specialized in Parkinson's care. With some paperwork, a lot of phone calls, and a promise to help, Tom got Richard the help he desperately needed. Slowly, his brother began to stabilize. Though the future was uncertain, at least now there was hope. In the months that followed, Tom took it one day at a time. There were difficult conversations and many tears, but there were also small victories, a laugh, a shared memory, moments where Richard started to feel like himself again. For the first time in decades, Tom felt the weight lift. He'd found his brother, and together they would rebuild what had been lost. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Months passed, and Tom's life had changed in ways he hadn't expected. He found himself spending more time with Richard, sharing quiet mornings and conversations that, at one point, felt impossible. His days were no longer just about routines. They were about reconnecting with someone who had once been lost to him. There was a peace now, a sense of closure, though he knew that the journey ahead would be slow and uncertain. Tom often thought about the decision he had made to reach out to offer help. It hadn't been easy, but it had been right. The questions lingered, though. What would his life have been like if Richard had come back sooner? Could their family have healed differently? And now, as Tom looked at his brother, he couldn't help but wonder, how far would you go for someone you loved, even after all these years? What would you do if someone you loved suddenly reappeared after decades?